Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host, Keifer MacDonald, and I'm joined today by Tom Beattie. Tom, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Another eventful few days to talk about in the world of Liverpool Football Club, which we'll get into shortly, starting with Sunday's 2-2 draw with Manchester United. But before we get into today's episode, a shout out to our sponsors, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn/bloodred. Our link will also give you an extra 4 months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is the link can be found in the podcast episode description box. Tom, I'm going to throw it straight to you. Liverpool 2, Manchester United 2. Is it a point gained or 2 points dropped in your eyes?
I felt coming into the game, I always feel it with the United game and the Everton games as well. Obviously, you know, they're against your arch rivals, aren't they, historically? And form does go out the window. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but it does seem to be the case, doesn't it? Even under Jurgen Klopp, I don't think we had the best record against Everton, for example. And they're always difficult games, aren't they, I think, up against United. Sort of no matter how they're doing sort of in the table. Obviously, they came into the game on a losing streak of 4 games lost, didn't they, on the spin. And, you know, I did kind of feel they'd raised the game, and possibly, you know, the conditions around the game, you know, the weather might have kind of hindered Liverpool's game slightly, but, you know, you can flip it the other way, can't you? That, you know, the two teams are dealing with the same kind of conditions. But yeah, I just felt on the day maybe that, you know, they raised the game, didn't they? And I felt that, you know, at times they kind of dominated the game as well. So possibly over the course of a 38-game season, possibly, you know, it is a point gained. But I think time will only tell on that, unfortunately. But I think coming into the game, given the context of sort of points dropped around us at the top of the table, you know, we can make a decent argument as well for it being 2 points dropped. So I think the context of it will only kind of be seen maybe in the months to come.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult one to assess, isn't it? I mean, the first half was pretty much a non-event. You know, two teams with contrasting styles. Liverpool, who tried to get the ball down on the floor and play. United obviously went for a more direct approach. You know, they were really kind of disciplined at the back, where they were that back 5, back 3, whatever you want to call it. The wing backs tucking in. So I did kind of worry if it would be the same kind of the story as last season when they obviously came to Anfield under Erik ten Hag, and Liverpool had, you know, something ridiculous. I think it was like 34 shots that afternoon, but, you know, none of them found their way past Onana, did they? And Liverpool just got really frustrated. Didn't really have a plan B on that afternoon under Jurgen Klopp. And in the second half on Sunday, when they took the lead on Martinez, I mean, we'll get onto the kind of defending of the goal shortly. But I did worry if Liverpool then would be able to kind of go again and you know, be able to find a way past United, because as you said, you know, they did really raise their game. I think that was quite evident. I always look at United and think you can kind of tell in those games with Fernandes whether he's up for it. And I think he was, you know, very early on. There was a ball he played down the line to Dalot, which he crossed into Diallo. It was a really nice outside of the boot pass, and from that moment on, I kind of thought United are up for it here. You know, new manager, and we saw that, as you say, they were on the back of, you know, 4 defeats in all competitions, but a few weeks before that, they beat City at the Etihad. So, you know, I know City aren't in the best run of form themselves, but it just goes to show that, you know, maybe United this season are probably better at raising their game for the bigger games rather than the likes of your Bournemouths at home and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, obviously Liverpool get back in it with Gakpo. It was a really good goal, wasn't it, Tom? I mean, what a run of form Gakpo's on at the minute.
Incredible. And you obviously need players like that to step up in games, don't you? And I remember in the Leicester game, he was there again. He stepped up in that game with a great goal. And yeah, he's just in a great kind of patch of form, isn't he? And, you know, it was one of them games, I think, possibly lacking in a bit of quality, I'd say, overall. It was a bit of an odd game to assess, because you expect with Liverpool, kind of the run Liverpool have been on so far this season and how they played under Arne Slot, that, you know, they would dominate the game in the midfield, but that didn't kind of come to pass, did it? I felt that United had kind of the lion's share, really, in terms of that midfield battle. I thought they did really well on the day. And yeah, it was a cagey game. And I remember thinking afterwards, you know, I think for the neutral, it would have been really entertaining. But I think there was a general lack of quality in the game overall, from kind of a fan's perspective. So yeah, I think it needed maybe a moment of brilliance. Obviously, Gakpo did step up to get that goal for Liverpool. But yeah, I think possibly Liverpool needed another moment like that. I think obviously, you know, Salah was able to score the penalty, but Yeah, I just kind of felt overall Liverpool didn't create many chances in the game. And yeah, it did look like a typical sort of derby game, really, didn't it? Overall, I felt that, Liverpool kind of got bogged down in the midfield at times. It looked a little bit leggy to me. Possibly the control on the possession at times, kind of building out from the back that we've seen all season from Liverpool, probably wasn't at its best, I felt, in the game itself. So, yeah, I think overall there was just a general lack of quality from Liverpool, I felt at times, and possibly that was the standout moment, I think, of decent quality in the game from Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of the big things that I thought on Sunday as well, that there was a real lack of control in midfield, especially, with United obviously going for a more direct style of play. Liverpool kind of left to kind of try and pick up second balls. But I don't think they really did that too well, to be honest. I mean, we know McAllister really likes to tackle and Gravenberch too, but I think they really missed the Bosline in that midfield. And don't get me wrong, I'm a really big fan of Curtis Jones, but I just thought on Sunday, I think the game maybe passed him by a little bit. I don't think he offered too much. And I think, you talk about United and their approach, obviously, the likes of Maguire and Martinez and they're obviously looking to play balls down the channel. There was no one really to close him down. It felt they kind of had a lot of time and a lot of space to do that. Whereas Szoboszlai, we've seen it so many times this season where he's kind of the metronome for that press, isn't he? He's almost like, Arne Slot's Roberto Firmino in a way kind of thing, isn't he? The way he presses, then kind of everyone follows him. So I thought that kind of played into United's hand as they were able to pick their time. And even at 2-1, obviously, Salah gets the penalty, scores a penalty, and you think from there, you're 2-1 up with 20, 25 minutes to go. That's when you're probably looking at it and thinking, if we drop points here, it's 2 points dropped. And Liverpool, just as I say, they just never really got a foothold on the board, did they? And closed the game out. Like we've seen so many times this season, they've been brilliant at it, killing games off. And, Slot's made substitutions, and he's almost kind of put the sting out of the games. But for whatever reason, on Sunday, just weren't able to do that, were they?
Yeah, it was a funny game all round, I felt. And, you touch on the substitutions there. It was possibly one of the few occasions where, it didn't quite work, did it, in terms of those changes that he did make. And obviously, I think we'll come on to it later in the show, but, possibly the substitution of Trent came a little bit too late given his performance. But yeah, Conor Bradley obviously came off the bench, and I think, he did pretty well getting on the ball and sort of that, having that sort of solidity defensively, possibly in the game. But yeah, I felt overall that the substitutions maybe didn't work as well as Arne Slot would have hoped. And again, it was one of those games. I think Arne Slot's being full of praise for Ruben Amorim sort of coming into the game, and I think afterwards as well. And I think he can sense that he was up against, quite a talented coach there. Obviously, they haven't been getting the results of late, but I felt in that game we sort of see maybe what he's trying to go for at United, probably for the first time, really, other than the City game, where they were obviously able to raise the game again in that game. But yeah, it was just an odd day, I think, for Liverpool. It was one of them games where there weren't many kind of standout performances, I'd say, in terms of, looking at it from a sort of positivity angle. You could possibly say Ryan Gravenberch, I felt, was decent on the day. He really put himself about. But, I think legs were pretty telling for Liverpool in the game. I felt that McAllister looked a little bit leggy at times. But again, he put himself about really well. And I thought he was one of Liverpool's better performers on the day as well. But yeah, I just feel overall it was a bit of a listless performance from Liverpool. And I think the manager... It hasn't happened many times so far this season, but I think he will be pretty disappointed, I'd say, with the overall performance. There was a bit of a break before the game coming into it. So there weren't so many tired legs per se. And yeah, it felt a little bit like an opportunity dropped, as we hinted at before. But yeah, obviously the games kind of come thick and fast. So, there's a cup semi-final to come as well within the same week. So I think in previous years, obviously, that would have been one of the biggest games of the season. But because Liverpool are fighting on multiple fronts, it almost feels like you can maybe make a couple of changes coming into that game. But yeah, I felt it was a tricky game to assess overall, wasn't it? I think against United, and I think maybe the players and the manager, they've got to kind of put it behind them quite quickly, I'd say.
Absolutely. And one of the kind of aspects of the game, maybe the elephant in the room heading into it, was of the Trent Alexander-Arnold slot game. His start is obviously his first start since Real Madrid. made that approach for him on New Year's Eve. We know that he's in the final 6 months of his contract now and he's free to speak to sides overseas. I mean, what did you make, Tom? I mean, first of all, would you have played him? And then second of all, his performance overall, because it looked like that was a clear plan from United. Dalot and Fernandes kind of going down that left-hand side. I think Gary Neville made a really good point after the game where he said, obviously, Dalot's, a right-footed left back. And, he'd normally cut inside, but straight away against Trent, he just went down the line. Obviously, fancied himself. And as I say, Fernandes got down there a few times as well. And it just looked like Trent was never really in the game. And, you can excuse bad performances and, he's not the first and not the last to have a bad performance for Liverpool. But I just think when the basics are so far wrong, I mean, you're looking at things like body language, you're looking at, recovery and stuff like that. He just, there was no desire really to make those. And I think that was highlighted on the first goal, the way he loses Lissandro Martinez. And, everyone's kind of keeping in the line and Trent's 4 or 5 yards ahead of everyone out. Martinez gets a run and scores past Alisson. But as I say, it was just one of those performances where I can forgive that if his Hollywood passes aren't coming off and that kind of thing. But it's just when the basics aren't there is when it's quite sour and you maybe do start to question whether he should have played in the game.
Yeah, it was one of those days for Trent where, obviously every good player can have bad games ultimately. But I felt on the day, he just didn't perform at all, did he? And, it was one of them games for him. I felt that, like you've just hinted at, normally with Trent, if there is a lapse in concentration at the back, you can kind of forgive it, given his kind of output, further down the field, or he's able to switch the play, or maybe come up with an assist or two within the game, and you sort of say, well, it's on as even. And you can see kind of what he brings to the game from a sort of attacking perspective. But yeah, I felt in the United game, even that aspect of his game, they nullified it really well. So I remember looking at the lineup coming into the game, and I couldn't quite get my head around what Amrin was trying to go for. Obviously, with Dalot out on that left-hand side, obviously Bruno Fernandes kind of tucking in behind the striker, and it worked the charm for them, didn't it? I thought, overall, even to see, obviously, Martinez, he got the goal. He was playing like a left-sided centre-back, weren't he, in that sort of back three. So, yeah, it was an odd setup coming into the game, and I thought maybe it caught Liverpool unawares a little bit. We didn't expect them, I think, to be quite that attacking. Obviously, when you go with a back five, maybe you're losing that man in midfield, and you would have expected Liverpool to maybe dominate that midfield and have, a fair control of the game. But that just didn't come to pass, did it? And I think maybe it was one of them games for Trent where, a few things didn't go well from early on. And I just felt, because obviously, you listen to people's perspectives on him as a individual, and, he's almost kind of the consummate professional, isn't he? And, I'd never kind of criticise him from that angle. I think his head would always be in the game, but obviously there was a lot of noise around him coming into the game. There'd been the bid that you touched upon before, and I think it was one of them games where maybe he had to come in and sort of give a big performance in a sense. And we've seen them down the years with numerous players, haven't we, where they've been able to silence the noise. And I felt for him a little bit in a sense that, from right back, you're up against, attackers. Ultimately, if you make a mistake, as was the case, obviously, for the first goal, that ball into midfield, you're made to pay for it. And I felt that certainly from that moment on, I think his head did drop a little bit. And I think the substitution ultimately become inevitable, I think, in the second half. And ultimately that did happen, didn't it? But yeah, it was a day to forget for Trent. And obviously only he'll know whether the outside noise has affected him. But I think overall it was a poor performance. And I think he'll be looking to respond to that in the weeks to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that as well. I mean, as you say, it kind of set the tempo early on. I think there was he got a ball on the right side and tried to play it first time with his left foot, and it kind of got snuffed out. And everyone around me where I was sitting kind of moaned and groaned that it was one of them where it felt like people, because of what's happened, and because maybe people are a bit angry of, that he's in the final 6 months of his contract. He's maybe not committed one way or another. He's obviously said he doesn't want to play out in public. Maybe people were looking for reasons to get on his back, and it felt like he never really had that support from the crowd. And we've seen it so many times down the years with players, and it's normally opposition players when Anfield gets in your head, the moans and the groans and whatnot, the boos and whatnot, and you're always playing against yourself as well as the opposition. And I thought that was very much what happened to Trent. And as you say, as you touched on at the top of the show, I mean, with Trent, he's one of those where he might try 5 or 6 of those Hollywood balls and they don't pay off. But then the seventh one, it does. Then you get an assist or you get a game-winning goal. And that's kind of been the beauty of Trent for the last, 7, 8, 9 years. But there was just something off about even his passing on Sunday. Everything looked rushed, everything looked in a hurry. He looked like he almost didn't want the ball. And as you say, for the equaliser, he tries that ball into midfield, which I'm not sure what he was trying. I think it was into Salah, but he just didn't have any pace on it, didn't have any height on it, and it just gets snuffed out really, really all too easily in the end. Obviously, tomorrow night, Liverpool play Tottenham in the semi-finals of the Cup. I mean, given Bradley's performance, and I know he's only on the pitch for 10 minutes, but some of the stats are quite damning if you look at it from a Trent Alexander-Arnold point of view. I mean, he won none of his ground duels or aerial duels during the game. Bradley won 3 ground duels in 10 minutes. So there is kind of every chance to say that, listen, you take Trent out for this one, let him have kind of a couple of days off, just kind of get his head straight. And you could argue the same against Accrington Stanley on the weekend as well in the FA Cup. But how would you play it? Because in one way, I'm sure Trent would like to say, just get you back out there, let me get across the line again, let me put my boots on. But then you've got Conor Bradley, who at the same time has, he's almost earned a start, hasn't he? I think this season he's done really well. He's probably not had too many starts when Trent's been fit. And this would be a really good, showing of faith or slot, wouldn't it, to kind of put Bradley in and say, look, I don't care if Trent doesn't play well, you're in. That's the whole point of being a backup right back, isn't it?
Yeah, I think ultimately the noise will never go away, I think, until there's a resolution either way on Trent's contract. And I think, the best way to kind of play yourself into form is ultimately to play games, isn't it? And this possibly could be a really good opportunity for him to respond quite quickly. But yeah, on the other hand, I think that Bradley's done more than enough to warrant a start, hasn't he? And again, it's a bit of an odd situation for the manager. Obviously, Bradley's last game for Liverpool came in the Real Madrid game, and that's a game, I think, in a performance that'll probably go down in Liverpool history if they're able to go on and win the Champions League this year. It was one of the best kind of right back performances I've seen at Anfield, and he's kind of earned that start, as you said before. He did really well when he came on against United. The nutmeg, I think, down the Kop end in the second half, really caught the eye as well. But yeah, it's a bit of an odd situation again, isn't it? It's one of them where I think there's kind of outside forces now where you're kind of having to manage it, and I don't think the Arne Slot's had to do that up until this point in his reign, and it's a bit of a test, isn't it? Obviously, there's always going to be outside noise when you're the manager of Liverpool, but Trent's pulling a performance there was probably below par for what you'd expect from Trent. And with the contract situation going on, and obviously the bid from Real Madrid around New Year as well, there is a bit of kind of doubts to silence, I think, for Trent a little bit now. And I think he'll be eager to get back out on the pitch personally. And yeah, it could be a bit of a situation where you may be giving the nod for the Tottenham game in the Carabao Cup, and then obviously we've got the FA Cup game coming at the weekend as well. So that might be the ample opportunity, the FA Cup game against Accrington Stanley, for a couple more changes then. But I actually think after what overall you could argue was a disappointing result against Man United, maybe that chance to get another win on the board against Tottenham in the cup semi-final, not least as well. That might be a massive opportunity for Liverpool to just kind of get that off the back again and sort of get the ball rolling in terms of that momentum, get that started again. So yeah, I think possibly there's an argument for putting Bradley in from the start, but I think maybe just given that he's come back from injury and that sort of thing, for me, I possibly be looking more so to start him in the Accrington game and maybe give Trent the nod against Tottenham.
Yeah, no, completely fair enough. Shout that. But Tom, just in terms of Trent as a whole, then, I mean, as I say, it's the elephant in the room, and it feels like for the most part of the season, I think Liverpool as a whole, and Arne Slot in particular, have done really well to kind of bat away the questions weekly from us, the press and whatnot. And so far you can say that it's kind of had no effect on Liverpool on the pitch. I know obviously Salah and Van Dijk have been quite vocal. Trent's obviously taken a more reserved step and said he wants to kind of have the negotiations behind closed doors. He's not going to give a running commentary of week by week like the other two might have done. But how do you see it? Because I think with the other two, Salah and Van Dijk, it feels pretty inevitable that they will re-sign for Liverpool. They'll agree new deals. I I think I've said it countless times with Salah, I don't think there's a market out there for him anymore. And I think, you look at Saudi Arabia, it's not what it was last year. And I think a player of, we've putting the numbers up that Salah is, in the best league in the world. He's not going to want to go and play in Saudi Arabia at the age of 33, is he? I think, you might look at clubs like PSG and Juventus a few years ago who might have taken a punt on him. I think PSG have moved away from that kind of superstar Galactico motto, haven't they? And obviously Juventus have had their financial problems. It's why they're obviously one of the remaining advocates of the Super League. So I feel like Salah and Van Dijk, as I said, are pretty nailed on to probably be at Liverpool next season. But with Trent, it does feel like it's a top of a coin at the minute. I mean, after the West Ham game, people were reading to his celebration where he put his hand to his ear and kind of looked to gesture, something about talking and gossip that was going on. Obviously, then a few days later, you have the bid for or the approach from Real Madrid. So clearly they are interested, and Real Madrid, they are the devil's club, aren't they, in terms of how they kind of conduct themselves and stuff. There's stuff coming out yesterday that Van Dijk had supposedly offered himself. So clearly they are trying to unsettle Trent. Will it be enough to kind of see him cut ties with Liverpool and go and explore something new? I mean, how do you kind of see it playing out between now and the end of the season?
Pretty much what you said there. I think obviously the older two are in a slightly different position. They are still two of the best players in the positions, respectively, in the world still. But maybe there isn't that market in terms of, putting down essentially what's going to be an extra transfer fee in terms of the money involved in terms of re-signing them. I think that it'd make a lot of sense for both parties, I think, with the two of them to get them signed up again. Obviously, we don't know what the length of those contracts might be or how that might kind of play out. But yeah, I think both for them in those cases, it makes a lot of sense for everyone involved for them to stay at Liverpool. With Trent, you can see both sides of it. I think that him as a player, he's won everything at Liverpool. He is 27 years of age, so he's entering what you typically say is prime years as a footballer, and maybe this is the biggest contract of his career, you could argue. And, he is at his boyhood club as well, so there's that kind of toss up a little bit of loyalty, isn't there, versus maybe a new challenge. And you can kind of see that from a neutral perspective. But yeah, obviously he's made that decision to not go public in terms of any of the sort of developments in terms of his contract, which is his prerogative. But I think in doing that, you've kind of got to accept as well that there's possibly going to be a bit more noise, because ultimately there's going to be more speculation unless you come out and actually, tell people what you're planning to do. So I think that's just kind of looking at it from a logical point of view. But, I wouldn't be that surprised, in some respects. It is his kind of choice if he was to leave on a free at the end of the season. We have come to the point in January now where it's less than 6 months away that he's able to walk away for nothing. So it's not a great position, I think, for the club to be in. It's a little bit of a different situation, like I touched upon before with the other two, where, you kind of expect them because of market value, their age, that sort of thing, to re-sign. But I think with Trent under contract, you'd probably expect him to be £100 million player, wouldn't you? And I think that's maybe the problem that Liverpool are dealing with slightly now. You look at Real Madrid, for example, they're able to offer a big signing-on bonus, maybe if it's even the same amount of money. I'm not saying that it will come down to money, but just kind of from that perspective, maybe Real Madrid are able to offer that little bit more in terms of incentivising Trent. And yeah, it is a bit of a tricky situation. I think it ultimately will probably, knowing kind of his character and what people have said about him in the past, it probably will come down to where he feels he's going to be most successful, sort of the experiences he might have. And although you can respect that, obviously from a fan's perspective, you won't be disappointed because he's a world-class player. Again, he's one of the best, if not the best, in his respective position. So it would be sad to lose a local lad, wouldn't it? And yeah, he is the scouser in the team as the chant goes and that sort of thing. So it would be a shame to lose him. But yeah, I feel that it's a bit of a tricky situation because there's been no kind of vocal or outward development, has there, in terms of his team coming out and saying something or even something from himself. So it's hard to kind of predict how it's going to play out. But yeah, I feel that Liverpool are in a little bit of a precarious position, just in terms of looking at it from a sort of logical perspective, that there's less than 6 months to go on his contract. So Yeah, we'll see how it plays out, but I think he's, in my eyes, less likely to stay. Just in terms of, his market value, things like that, his age. Maybe there's not as many suitors as you touched upon before for the likes of Salah and Van Dijk. So yeah, that's a bit of an odd situation again.
Absolutely. I do think, though, one way or another, I think, some clarity does need to kind of come out, because I think with Trent, whether he was expecting to kind of not lead both clubs on, but maybe kind of dabble with both kind of clubs in the January window and maybe hear what Madrid have to offer, hear what Liverpool are kind of going back and forth with. I think at some point, I can understand why he didn't want negotiations if he played out in public, because, he wants to be dignified and all that kind of thing. But I think there's a period now where I thought, the atmosphere at Anfield, it wasn't a vast majority of people. It was pockets of the crowd and stuff. And I just think that has the possibility to turn toxic very quickly. And I just think, if Trent leaves, and I'm sure he will know in his head one way or another, if he, what he's doing, he will know at this stage of the season. He's had enough to deal with in terms of Arnie Slot. He's been working with him for 6 or 7 months. I think he just needs to come out and try and make it as kind of amicable as possible, and come out and be like, look, this is what I'm doing, because at the end of the day, Liverpool are on for a league title here. They're doing really well in the Champions League, and the last thing he wants to kind of be remembered for is the kind of someone who almost took centre stage when he shouldn't be. If he wins the Champions League and he wins the Premier League this season, he walks out the back door. But he's played an instrumental role in that. You can, fair enough, whatever. But if these performances are these negotiations and speculations are clouding his head, like we saw on Sunday afternoon, and that kind of drags on, it's not fair on Arne Slot. It's not fair on the rest of his teammates, and it was certainly it goes from being a dignified approach that he's taken to being a very undignified approach. So I think one way or another, something he does need to come out and kind of address it this month and kind of just let people know. But Tom, we'll quickly touch on before we finish the Tottenham Hotspur semi-final tomorrow. Obviously, it was only 2 weeks ago that Liverpool beat Tottenham 6-3 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I think I've touched on this in every round that we've done the pod. I mean, the League Cup is always a funny one. At the start of the season, no one's really too fussed about it. It's just another game. And in Liverpool's situation, they've obviously played 3 Premier League sides, but the more you move on to the latter stages of the competition, it's like, hang on here, there's a trophy up for grabs, and all of a sudden you're 2 games away from Wembley. I mean, it's a huge opportunity for Liverpool tomorrow. I suppose not just Liverpool, but Arne Slot to kind of eye up that first trip to Wembley with Liverpool and potentially get his hands on some silverware.
Yeah, it's a chance to kind of make history, isn't it? And kind of write your name into the history books early on in your reign. And I think there's been a lot of kind of successful managers, hasn't he, particularly from overseas, who've come over and really valued the competition in the past kind of couple of decades. You think back to Jose Mourinho. He kind of got his reign off at Chelsea, didn't he, with the Carling Cup win against Liverpool back in 2005. Pep Guardiola, obviously, I think he won it 4 years on the spin, didn't he, at Man City? So there is kind of that tradition, I think, now in terms of, managers coming in and maybe trying to get that first, kind of big trophy win under the belt. And yeah, I do think it offers you that kind of springboard, I think, for the rest of the season. So yeah, I do think it's one of them, like you touched upon there, that you only really start to take it seriously at maybe the quarterfinal or semi-final stage. But yeah, there's a trophy there to be won. And ultimately, we don't know what kind of 11 he's going to go for, or the lineup. He may look to rest people, given the amount of kind of plates that are spinning for him at the moment in terms of, fixture congestion, that sort of thing. But it is a massive opportunity for Liverpool, I think. And a trophy is a trophy at the end of the day. And it's a trip out to Wembley, hopefully, if you're able to come past this semi-final. So, yeah, I think it's a massive opportunity for the new manager, given the context of his reign. And, it might allow that kind of springboard, as I touched upon before, for maybe later on in the season, kind of getting over the line and in sort of what you might characterise to be the bigger competition for Premier League and the Champions League.
Absolutely. I mean, in his press conference earlier this afternoon, Slot was pretty coy on his team. He wouldn't even disclose if Kelleher will be playing or not. We've obviously seen this has been his competition over the last couple of years. I took that as a hint almost that he's willing to go strong. I mean, we've seen in the earlier rounds that, Southampton, Brighton, and when they played West Ham, the likes of Tyler Moore and Endo, those have played. Chiesa more recently. Obviously, Gakpo's had a strong run in the competition here, but it very much feels like Slot's willing to mix it up tomorrow. So we know there'll be no sub slide, but there's, it feels like he will go quite strong. And as you say, the Atkinson game coming up on Sunday is a chance to maybe rest the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold, maybe to rest, your Mo Salahs of the world and that kind of thing. So I think the timing of the fixture as well is almost, if Liverpool were heading into a Premier League fixture at the weekend, you'd almost be caught in two minds of like, hang on, which way are we going here? But because, the kind of nice draw they've got on Saturday afternoon, it kind of gives Slot no excuses to kind of go strong, does it?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I mean, it's one of those situations where, you've obviously got the cup game at the weekend and, you're coming off the back of a game that possibly for the fans and maybe the players as well, it felt a little bit disappointing. So, yeah, it's a chance to kind of put that right. And, it is a cup semi-final. So, you want to kind of take that seriously as well. And I think that the manager kind of hinted that, like you said, that you might be willing to mix it up a little bit. He's a little bit coy-worthy in terms of who's going to start the game and that sort of thing. So, yeah, maybe he's looking to kind of catch Tottenham unawares a little bit and maybe spring a bit of a surprise, I think, through the week.
Absolutely. And Tottenham have got a few players out themselves, or more than a few, actually. I think Postecoglou said this afternoon it was maybe 10, 13 players that were missing. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had another 6-3 encounter on our hands. Tom, before we finish, actually, for a score prediction for tomorrow night.
I'm predicting the Liverpool win. I think it'll be 2-1.
I think 2-0. I think they'll get a clean sheet regardless of who plays Kelleher or Alex. But Tom, thank you very much for joining me today. That's been all from this week's Liverpool.com podcast. We'll be back next week to discuss everything that's happened in the busy world of Liverpool Football Club. Thank you for listening.